We're delighted that you're here with us today. My name is Sheila Matias. I'm the Executive Director of the Leadership Institute here at Purdue Northwest. And I'm so delighted to see some familiar faces and some new folks joining us because we think we have a really special session for you today. So I'm going to give you a shameless plug for the Leadership Institute at PNW. We're really proud to be the hub of leadership development in Northwest Indiana. We merged a few different elements about 3 years ago, and we believe we have really begun to nail it around leadership development, both for professionals, for PNW managers, for youth and high school students. So we've got a lot going on, a lot of programs, and just wanted to share that we are here. If anyone needs some leadership coaching, we love to do that as well. So joining us today, we have Dr. Rachel Clapp-Smith, who's our academic director, and our assistant academic director, Jane Thomas. Both of them are from the School of Business, and they are guiding the academic and research-based programming that we are developing. So I want to introduce my colleague, Makisha Neal. Jason Williams is in the background. Jason, I don't know if you want to wave, but Jason is helping us guide the ship here from the background. And then Makisha is our assistant director, and she's going to introduce our fabulous speaker, who I will just tell you has been a colleague of mine as well. And Makisha and I really are excited to have Ebony join us today. We worked in the trenches with Ebony doing summer learning programming, and we know for a fact that what she's going to talk about is genuine and real and very insightful. So Makisha, carry it off.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And again, we are so excited, as Sheila said, to have Ebony Campbell from the Chicago Housing Authority to join us today. And Sheila briefly shared, she and I worked with Ebony a few years ago, doing some wonderful work with youth programming for underserved children here in Chicago. Just a little bit about Ebony, the reason why we're so excited, because she's just so talented and so well-versed in the arena of leadership in general. So Ebony, again, is with the Chicago Housing Authority. She serves as the Senior Director of Resident Services, where she's focusing on youth, education, economic independence for those people who need it the most. For those people, and she supports the achievement of families experiencing poverty in historically marginalized and underserved areas. She holds a master's degree in communications with a focus on managing complexity and collaborative leadership from Northwestern University. So she's very well versed, again, to talk to us today about kindness and building authentic trust in the workplace as a leader. It's been my experience working alongside Ebony that she exudes kindness, and she exudes the type of leadership that makes her team want to excel. She exudes the types of leadership that makes her team want to do the work, which is really important when you're working with youth, because sometimes they can be very trying, right? So you want to make sure that you have somebody who's in charge, who's leading the ship with a certain authenticity that Ebony definitely possesses. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce her and let her shine her magic. Go ahead, Ebony.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to share my screen now. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with me. Thank you, Makisha. And this is amazing. I'm really excited to be here with you. Thank you for that generous introduction, Sheila, as well. And I don't plan to talk long because I'm hoping this will be more of a collaborative discussion. I see you all as really the experts, the leaders here. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you about leadership and how kindness can help to build authentic, trust-based relationships in our work partnerships. In terms of what we'll be learning today, I'll spend a few minutes sharing my thoughts on partnerships and kindness, as demonstrated by being intentional about recognizing what your partners need, plus meeting those needs with empathy, the importance of listening more and speaking less, and what it means to the relationship when you communicate with care and compassion. At the end of the presentation, please know that I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, anything that's coming up for you, or hear your thoughts on what resonates. And please let me know and jump in. I'm not able to see the chat if there's any technical issues or if there's something that you want me to make more clear. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm Ebony Campbell, and my background includes working at the intersections of affordable housing, educational mobility, and economic development in support of Chicagoans living in under-resourced and underinvested communities. So much of my work involves opening doors, closing gaps, and dismantling barriers to opportunities for Black and Brown families that have historically been excluded from sharing in our nation's prosperity. For nearly 2 decades, I've connected families and young people, especially to the education pathways, early work experiences, and asset building opportunities necessary to building their social capital, their confidence, their wealth, and their well-being. I really love doing this work, and I've come to know that the impact that we make is directly proportional to the effort that we put into developing rapport and nurturing thoughtful partnerships that meet the needs and interests of those that we serve. And so Makisha talked a little bit about a youth program, a youth summer jobs program that we collaborated on many, many years ago, a beautiful and a thoughtful partnership. And that was one in which we wanted to ensure that our youngest residents mitigated summer learning loss. They are between the ages of 13 and 15, so middle adolescents, ensuring that they were prepared to go into those high school years. So that partnership involved so many different moving parts, from City Colleges of Chicago to Summer Advantage to the Greater Chicago Food Depository, CHA. And so when I think about partnerships, I'm really asking what is a partnership really? How do we define it? And some might say it's an arrangement where parties known as partners agree to cooperate and advance their mutual interests. I certainly believe that's true. But I also invite you to consider that a partnership is much more than just cooperation and shared purpose. I believe that is the foundation. But a true partnership is one in which we each share in the risk and the reward. And when there is so much at stake, particularly in terms of the collective impact our work may have on the lives of our participants, when we have so much to lose and to gain as a result of our work together, it makes it even more important to build and to lead with trust in those partnerships, knowing that any inevitable challenges can be solved together through meaningful conversation and collaboration. One way to get us there is by practicing and demonstrating kindness in our leadership. So compassionate leadership. How might we support our partners by caring about their needs, caring about them as humans? My approach to this generally starts by extending trust at the onset and recognizing that our partners are people who have agency. They are in the driver's seat of their own lives. They have beliefs and experiences that may be different from mine, but trusting in their wisdom, their own lived experiences to make effective decisions. I think that's especially critical when there's a power differential. So I work for the Chicago Housing Authority. We serve as a funder and we contract out with organizations. So through grants and informal partnerships, as well as through formal contracts. And so there exists in my role a power differential. You might say I manage a portfolio of about 15 different programs across 30 partners. And when you have an identity that holds power, that can influence your program, it's important to create safe space for other identities to take power. For me, that's where listening comes in. Listening to our partners with empathy and validation can go a really long way in gaining their confidence, creating psychological safety, and building authentic trust in the relationship. For me, safety is one of my highest values. It's something that I work to cultivate in my personal, my professional relationships. And so I always want to extend that to the people that I work with, that they feel that this is a safe and brave space and they can share the things that are important to them and that they will be heard. So I do often ask my partners questions like, what does support look like to you? Or help me understand. Can you say more about? So really being inquisitive, assuming positive intent, and really listening to what's said and also to what's unsaid. Nelson Mandela said that courage is not the absence of fear, but it's the triumph over it. And it does take courage, I believe, to be vulnerable, to really listen, particularly to those whose opinions differ from yours. And I would say also, especially to the quietest voices that are worth listening to, not assuming that their silence, that you interpret that as cohesion. I've often found that in partnerships, sometimes people are quiet and they don't want to say much. So it will take a conversation offline, not within the larger group, and to really deep dive into understanding what the needs are or what they may be experiencing that I may not be seeing, but it is important for me to know. So not only am I checking in with my partners to see what they need, I'm also affirming what I hear through statements like, thank you for trusting me with this. Or even, you have my support, we're in this together. I think that goes a really long way. Even if I don't agree with their approach or understand what the real challenge is for them, I am responsive and acknowledging what I've heard, either by communicating my support for the decision that they've made, again, extending to them their expertise. I support you in the decision that you're making, or my commitment to working towards a resolution together. It's certainly a process that starts with listening more, speaking less. I think that can go a long way in accelerating trust in the relationship. So some of you may be familiar with this quote by Plato. I think about it a lot, especially as it relates to my work and my own leadership journey. You just never know what someone is going through. And so what I've come to learn and understand is that by extending trust, by listening with empathy, by staying curious, being vulnerable, that will build trust and share partnership. And that, to me, demonstrates kindness, which can lead to the most transformative partnerships. We could talk a little bit about that. I told you this was going to be very quick. I just wanted to lay a foundation for my thoughts here, and I wanted to give a chance to open it up if you all had any specific questions for me, or if there's anything that landed with you and your own personal experience that you wanted to talk about a little bit more. And I also wanted to say I am happy to connect. This is my LinkedIn information here. If there is something that you want to talk about offline, anything that you're more curious about, I would love to hear from you.
Our chat is open, everyone, and we really hope you'll use it. Ebony, that was so thought-provoking. I just have to say, not surprising, because as your former partner, this is what you shared with us every day, all day, when we were in the trenches trying to solve really complex problems. You know, you mentioned how many variables there were in our summer programming, and that is that's a really great way to capture it. But because we were problem solvers in the trenches with you, and you did have the power, and we were the contractor, maybe you could just share a little bit about, you know, that whole balance of power, and how you know, knowing that you have the power and that the other person might be fearful of the power, respectful of the power, afraid they'll mess up because you have the power and they don't. How do you kind of, you know, like maybe when you're walking into a room or when you're working on a team, how do you kind of acknowledge but dissipate some of those concerns or fears?
Thank you, Sheila. I think for me, one of the things I try to keep top of mind is that, again, we are partners. We are each sharing in the risk and reward here. So it is of benefit to me to have a strong collaborative relationship, and for you to know that as a partner that you have my support. Sometimes when you have different entities in a room, and again, I think about all the moving parts for our Learn and Earn program, for instance, we had a partner who was very concerned about having young people on campus. Not that they didn't invite them to be on campus, but it was more about protecting the asset. So how can we ensure that the asset, being the institution, is protected while we have a lot of young people here? And then we had another partner who wanted to open up as much access to the campus as possible, understanding that young people don't want to be confined to a classroom. They don't want to be in summer school, really. They've done that throughout the year. So how can we get them to access all the resources in the college? Then we had another partner who was providing food, and sometimes that food would arrive on time, sometimes it would not. Sometimes we had to figure out what we were going to do for food or snacks that day and the next day. And we would often come together, debrief, have conversations daily. And it was a lot of raw emotion. It was a lot of upset about things that went wrong, and brainstorming about how we can get there. So my approach, Sheila, was really like opening up that space, listening, doing more listening than talking. I think sometimes people just need to be heard for you to truly understand what the real issue is here. It wasn't that the college didn't want our young people there. It's just we needed to ensure that the property was maintained. And so once we understood that, we figured out a way to ensure that we had adults present, more adults than maybe we had even anticipated, ushering young people into those spaces, doing some checks. And that was really for the preservation of the relationship, not so much for the benefit of the young people, but we did find out as a result of that some of those adults did form some strong, caring relationships with those young people. And just, again, really listening. Just because I am the funder does not mean that I know everything or what's right. Leaning on the partners for their own expertise. They were brought on because of that, because they have strong youth development experience. And so allowing them to make those decisions for themselves and clarifying where needed and really providing support for the most part.
Thank you. Rachel talks about the conversation openers. Say more. What does support look like from me? And she refers to Brene Brown, who is kind of a favorite of our leadership program.
Love her.
Okay, yeah. So we want to be sure that everyone on this call knows that Brene Brown is a wonderful resource.
Yes.
Her books are easy reads, but they're just, they have so many tools in them. Ebony, could you maybe share a little bit about your impressions from Brene Brown's work, and how you kind of share some of those? When I was listening to you, I was hearing Brene Brown's work, and I was like, you've really made it come alive. And
Rachel, I would love to hear what came up for you too. When I think of Brene Brown, I think there's this one quote of her that says, "Clear as kind, unclear as unkind." Yeah. And I do think about that often. I think that's one of the kindest things you can do, is to be clear, especially around expectations, what in terms of your partnership relationships, what they can expect from you, what you expect from them, to make it very clear so people understand that encouragement, support, mutual accountability is going to flow both ways in this relationship. But being really clear, and I think people appreciate that when you are clear. This is what I want. This is what I need, and people feel confidence in coming to you when maybe they can't meet those expectations, and trusting that we can problem solve it together. Again, their success is my success. At the end of the day, I need them to be successful. So to the extent possible that I can do whatever it takes to get them there, I will.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's a very good point. I take notes and I wrote down 3 things. And the first thing I wrote down was when you said agency, right? That people want to take a stake in their own lives, or people want to have a stake rather in the partnership. So that was one of the things that I admire most about working with you, is that you did make sure that there was equity. Not just for the students that we serve, but also for all of the partners. So when we were balancing those very difficult moments of the kids didn't get enough food, or this campus wants to do that, and this campus wants to do this, how do we make it equitable for everyone? You did make sure that there was an open door policy, and that people were very comfortable coming to you and speaking and making their voice heard. Another point I wanted to make that goes along with what you just said, Ebony, was you said silence does not equal cohesion. And so oftentimes we would be in meetings and people would just be silent, and maybe they just weren't happy, or maybe not happy. They weren't comfortable with coming forward with their ideas. And I wrote down that you said check in and affirm. So sometimes people just need that gentle nudge to say, yes, you're doing good, you're doing a good job, or it's okay for you to come in, or how are you doing today? Those things are really important. And then the last thing I wrote down was creating safe spaces. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit more about how you create safe spaces within your own department.
Sure thing. Thank you, Makisha. And I do think back to some of our summer youth programs. For example, it's 6 weeks. For CHA, it's 2,100 young people engaged in programs across 300 plus work sites, 20 plus partners just for the summer jobs program. So it can be really intense. Things move very close, very fast, and things happen. As much as we plan for things to continuously improve from the previous year, things happen that we cannot anticipate. So it is really listening to understand, not necessarily respond. When I talked about that power differential too, some of that I do have to accept as the funder, that there are people in the room who do want and need to hear my voice. They do need me to speak up on their behalf for fear. They may have a fear of tarnishing the relationship with the other partner. So there are times when I do have to be very clear, clear as kind, and then also have those offline conversations that you mentioned, Makisha, checking in. People may fall silent or not say much because, again, unsure if it's appropriate to do so, what will happen as a result of that. So sometimes those offline conversations include just saying, I hear you, or even acknowledging that was awful. And I'm sorry that happened to you. And what can I do to support you? And it may be, can you talk to this other partner? Can we, these are what my needs are. So having those conversations to understanding the needs and then taking action from there. In terms of my own staff, Makisha, I would say, definitely being vulnerable in the sense that, I'm not asking them to do anything that I would not do myself. Being honest about what I know and what I don't know, and being supportive, and really being supportive, understanding what do they want, what do they need, particularly for my staff, even if it's to move on from their current position. We have very open and transparent conversations about career pathways and growth within my team. And I know that isn't always true for other relationship management relationships, but we talk about that. And I have an informal mentoring circle with emerging leaders, female identified leaders within my organization. And we have very open and honest conversations about barriers and successes and how we might help each other to get to where we need to be.
That's awesome.
Ebony, hi, I'm Rachel. I have a question. We talk in the Leadership Institute about leadership as a journey, right? Not a destination, and that there are a lot of obstacles, and we stumble a lot as we get on our leadership journey. We ourselves try to be very vulnerable about our moments that taught us something. And they may be moments that are not our proudest moments necessarily, but what we've been able to learn from them. And I think we have found with some of our groups, particularly with our younger audiences, it turns out to be really helpful to learn, oh, this person who seems like they've got it together may not have always had it together at every moment in their life. I was wondering if you could share with us a moment that has mattered in getting you to this place where, what you're describing today is a leader I would want to work with, right? I would want to follow you. I would want my leader to be really transparent about my opportunities for development. And I would want my leader to ask me, what does support look like? All the things that you're describing, I think, God, yes. do you mind sharing a little bit about your journey in getting there? And then, you know, if it continues to be a journey, maybe you also have something that you see on the path ahead of you that you would like to continue to work on.
I love that question, Rachel. Thank you. Gosh, where to start? So many failures. I think part of it was coming to understand that, and let me take a step back, that some of it is more rooted in perfectionism and like acknowledging that and understanding where some of that behavior comes from, how I grew up, you know, the need to overachieve, the need to do well. And as an adult, coming to accept that, or coming to reject that in a way that I hadn't when I was much younger, and being overly ambitious in a way that I would say led to burnout and some other things. So it's more some inner work to think differently about productivity. I will say the pandemic definitely had me rethinking my relationship to productivity and understanding that rest is productive. It is for me. So that is something that I prioritize. I have very strong rest practice, and that I don't do anything that I don't want to do. And that doesn't come easy. That doesn't come easy. Because I think especially in your personal relationships, that can seem to some people as a rejection in a certain way. But I work very hard through the week. And so on the weekends, I only do the things that I want to do. And I do what my body tells me to do, which is often to sit down, rest. And if I choose to do something, I will. Not to say that I don't have fun, but again, it's just a redefining what that means to me now versus where I was before. I would say that certainly bleeds over into work and professional too, understanding that people need to rest. And it isn't always about busyness, constantly being in motion as a demonstration that people have value and are contributing. Because I understand that as it relates to myself, I can receive that for the people that I work with, and accept and support that they do need downtime, and people need to take their PTO and their days off, their mental health days, and they need to take the time that they need to support themselves. So it's some of that inner work, Rachel, that has kind of bled out into my professional work, and understanding that, you know, we all are doing the best that we can, and nobody knows what they're doing really. We're just all doing the best that we can. Right. And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we don't, but learning from those experiences are most important.
Thank you for sharing that. I will echo that comment. I would say a moment that was really meaningful for me was actually something that Brene Brown does talk about, and that is everybody's doing the best they can with the resources they have, right? And so if people are not meeting the expectations we have, we might need to do a little bit of a check-in of whether we've given them the resources they need in order to be successful. And sometimes those aren't at our fingertips either, but it's just, you know, it is an easier way to assess how to help someone be successful by thinking about what resources are available to them. Thank you for sharing that.
I don't know if someone is trying to ask a question. Okay. So I enjoyed your answer, Ebony, just because it reminds us that we're all works in progress. And I think a lot of people look at someone who's very successful and figure, oh my gosh, they've got the magic formula. Look how they've got it all together and they've figured it all out. And I'm still here struggling, trying to figure out my next steps or how to self-correct. And your narrative is really instructive because it shares that, you know, you were challenged around being an overachiever and that you knew that wasn't serving you well over time. And you had to do the self-work it took to adjust. And so that's, to me, that's a really valuable takeaway for everyone on the call, because we're all works of progress, and we all need to keep adjusting and changing as life throws stuff at us. And the pandemic's a perfect example. That was very challenging for most of us. I don't know anyone that aced the pandemic, that's for sure. Even though many of us are overachievers, there was no formula on how to ace it. And so we all, did the best we could. Some of us did very poorly, and some of us probably did a little bit better. I have a colleague that says, I spent it learning new things. I'm like, oh, I don't know that I learned anything other than survival, but it's just how different people adjusted to such a strange historic time in our lives. You talked about one thing that I know has been a challenge for me in my career, and that's if they can be called crucial conversations, they can be called tough conversations, but many of us were raised where confrontation is not anything that's comfortable. The way I was raised, my dad was very strong authoritarian. We were new to the country, so it was like work, do. And, to have confrontational discussions was not really encouraged. In fact, sometimes, discouraged. And so for me, that was always a burden as I was developing as a leader. How do you sometimes have those conversations? You can't avoid everything. Many of us are confrontation avoidant, and we try to do anything we can do to avoid having those crucial conversations. Can you give us any of your secret tips on how, because I've seen you do it, and I just think that's you have a grace about you. You use your personality, and I think that may be one of the tips, is use the tools you have. For every one of us has a personality, we're all unique, but what tips do you have on how to handle those conversations that really can't be avoided, that really help you as a leader be authentic, be vulnerable, but also somebody's got to make the call sometimes, and somebody's got to guide the ship, and somebody's got to be the tough guy. And how do you handle that in an environment that I know is very challenging at times?
Thanks, Sheila. Approaching it with curiosity, I would say, is the beginning. And really, I can think of a couple of examples with colleagues, and it was not approaching it as a tough conversation per se, but something that is needed, and just being curious about what is going on, and what can we do to really strengthen this relationship. So framing it in that sense that, that you want to have a better, a good relationship. You value the communication that you have, but wanting to understand what's going on. And sometimes it's asking, were you aware that you were yelling in that meeting? And it's like, oh, I didn't know, or, and I just was so passionate about, and maybe they weren't aware that it was coming off a certain way, because it is important that when I'm a part of the meetings that I am facilitating, but also observing and connecting the dots for people in the room that may not be able to see things from different perspectives. So maybe seeing it as a kindness and making them aware of something that is coming up for me, or something that they may not know happened, transpired, and then just having a conversation around it. And sometimes it is, oh, this is just how I talk. This, when I get excited, this is how it comes across, or this is what I meant, or no, I was yelling because this is really important to me. And acknowledging that. So understanding that this is how this person prefers to communicate, and deciding if that's how I want to communicate, if that's the relationship that I want to be in, if I want to make a different decision about how I interact with this person. But it starts with approaching it with curiosity, and asking questions to sort of get to what is the real issue here. For me, that's been my approach. And really, I think people are glad to have the conversation. to open it up. And there's certainly times when people will put up a boundary that I just need to accept, that they may not be ready to talk about that, or that, that's for another discussion. I can certainly understand that, but thinking about how important the partnership is, and at the end of the day, who we are really serving, it is a benefit to me to be in good, strong relationship with my partners. So really working relentlessly towards having that good relationship and good communication. I think it starts with asking questions.
Thank you. That's great. Great answer. Lots of good tools there. Anyone in the chat want to throw anything out there, something that's resonated with you, or if you just want to take yourself off mute and throw out some ideas so that we make the most of Ebony's wisdom and time here. I think that she's shared a lot of great ideas with us, and I just want to be sure that we're hearing anything that might have resonated with anyone on the call.
Sheila, I would like to say something. Thank you, Ebony, for sharing today. I could appreciate that, for lack of a better word, the simplicity of it. And I do believe that the level of kindness and how you treat people and leading with kindness can really be that simple. And I think that sometimes we take too much into it and too many levels, and to just start with the basics of I'm seeing my glove, it's cold in here, sorry. um, with kindness. And so that's what drew me to your presentation today. And I thank you so much for making the time, and very informative, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, LaShawn. That was very kind. I'm very grateful too. Thank you.
So LaShundra is a healthcare expert, and so she has a lot of rules that she has to follow, but being able to follow the rules and follow the expectations and do everything that's expected, but then have kindness layered over it. I think that's optimum. That's really powerful, LaShundra. So thank you for sharing your question. Anyone else? Pam.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Hi. I wanted to piggyback off something Sheila said. I think that we're like children from different parents, because I grew up the same way. But we were also raised to be very humble. And so how can you practice being humble, but also letting it be known of your accomplishments and what you bring to the table, that it's of value, to get people to listen?
Thank you, Pamela. That is a good question. And I'd love to hear from the group too. Probably one that I still grapple with as a leader, and especially as a woman leader, balancing, how we are as women often socialized to be quiet about things, or let the work speak for itself, not to be too aggressive, but then coming to understand that people won't necessarily know what you're doing unless you're telling them, or promoting or self-advocating for yourself. So it's reconciling the two, and I would say I'm still on a journey towards that, for sure. So Pam, if you have any thoughts or recommendations, or the larger group, I would love to hear that. I certainly think I lean or err towards humility, in the sense that the successes will show for themselves, but, and not to say what is right or wrong, but should there be a different approach? And I think that's a personal one. That's a personal decision to make. But we'd love to throw it out to the larger group to see if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Well, thank you, Ebony. There's a good question from Teresa in the chat. What are some hard lessons you've had to learn, and any advice you'd like to share as a result of the lessons you learned?
One of the things that's coming up for me in terms of hard lessons is there came a point for me in my career where I certainly felt like I needed to stop creating ceilings for myself. And though I had been, I think about being very ambitious about some changes that I wanted to make when I first got here, and hitting roadblocks, hearing no, we can't do this because of XYZ. We've always done things this way. We don't necessarily have the funds or resources for that. And that can be discouraging. But I think it got to a point for me where I had to push beyond that and say, I'm going to do what I feel needs to be done, and ask for forgiveness later. So starting to say yes to things that I would not normally say yes to, having been discouraged before, having heard a certain response before, and shifting power back to myself, and knowing that, I'm invited into certain rooms, into certain spaces because people want to hear my voice, and demonstrating my expertise around certain things. So maybe that addresses your question too, Pam, a little bit about not being so humble or listening sometimes to the voices of others, because what do they know? I mean, they don't necessarily have, they can only speak from their own experience, but when you have your own vision, you have your own desire to see something come into fruition, sometimes you have to just push past that and see what happens.
That's good, Ebony. That reminds me that leadership is given to you, and you can accept it. And sometimes we tend to say, no, I'm not the leader here. I'm not the leader. And Ebony does have a gracious way of being in a room, and she may not speak a lot, but you can feel her power because she lets you know that, this is who I am. And I think that's, she raises a good point about us being women. And sometimes I know there are some men on the call as well, which, bear with us for just a moment. But sometimes our culture socializes us to say, we're going to step back and we're not going to be the person in charge. And, it might be hard for us to find our voice. And I think that's something that in my experience, it requires practice, and you keep having to, practice it, because for some of us, it doesn't come naturally. It just is something, it's a skill that you have to keep practicing, just like riding a bike. We say that leadership is a muscle, and, it's a muscle that you have to exercise. So like anything that you learn, leadership, there are techniques, there's, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. If you look at all the leadership stuff, you don't need to go there. You can just come to the Leadership Institute. We'll help you out. But, leadership really is a muscle, and it needs to be practiced, and it needs to be practiced with confidence, and with, trying different techniques. Even one of the modules that we often teach is being a charismatic leader. You think somebody's born to be this awesome leader, like, how did that person get to be that way? They were just born like that. That actually is very rare. There are some talents that you may be born with, but you can develop a lot of your talents. So we really believe that it's kind of an 80-20 thing. You might have 20% of, special gifts that you might have, intellect and all those kinds of things, but the other 80% is a muscle. You need to practice some things. You need to, educate yourself, find a leader that you really like, and study them, find out what are their skills. So Ebony is a great leader that you can study. She has it going on. So Teresa says, yes, women sometimes create our own ceilings. Yeah, Ebony spoke of that. Ebony, any ways, techniques that you could share about how to kind of, accept the ceilings, but also keep pushing on forward?
I would say trial and error, Sheila, for sure. When I first came to the Housing Authority, I can remember a meeting, I think it was a board meeting, where someone was presenting on our youth programs, and they were talking about that we served a specific demographic. And someone on the board was asking about, well, what about this other group of young people? And they said, well, that isn't necessarily our priority. We have this captive audience here. We want to ensure that they have opportunities during the summer. And that just didn't sit well with me. And I thought about that what I could do to change that, and how we could be more equitable in our practices and our policies as it relates to uh, opening up opportunities to all those who were residents, all those who were eligible for programming, and not just those who had the social capital and connection to those opportunities. And so seeing that as a ceiling, we have always done things a certain way, but something internally felt like that wasn't right. And how can I, at the end of the day, say that there's equity and parity in our process if we aren't demonstrating that through our outreach, through our selection, through our assessment of participants? And so I decided to make a shift, and it was gradual. So little things from moving from a paper application that was distributed on site to an online application where we did more, a larger outreach effort to ensure that all of our young people were aware and they had this common application that they can apply online to different opportunities. And within, I would say, 3 years, we saw where we were serving 90% of our participants were a part of this first group. We saw it being more 60-40, then shifting to 50-50. So to me, it was just trying. And even at the end of the day, if we didn't get it perfect, at least there was a shift in our thinking, for me, in my thinking around things, and how I can get my team on board to make this change, seeing it as critically important that we were serving all young people in a meaningful way. Learning from those takeaways, from those lessons, always doing things to constantly improve, and then listening to the voices of the people that we serve and the people that we partner with.
Ebony, that was a great response. We're going to wrap up shortly, but there's a really good question here in the chat room I wanted to share. It's from David Ellis. He says, do you have any tips for when you're starting a new initiative where partners, people, and resources are fluid and somewhat undetermined?
I like that question, David. And I'm thinking that happens a lot. People want to partner, have conversations like this every day. People want to partner, but it's unclear the best way to do that. I think starting with, what is the problem that we're trying to solve for? What is the vision that we hope to see collectively at the end of the day? And what sort of resources do we each have to bring to the table? If it's not necessarily capital or funds, maybe it's location, maybe it's young people, other relationships. So I would say starting there to understand, what are we working towards, and what do we all bring to the table to have a conversation around, does this partnership really make sense? And is it truly a partnership? Because sometimes things aren't, they're more collaborations. But again, it's having some honest conversations about what is the outcome? What do we hope for at the end of the day?
Very good response, David. I hope that answers your question. We're going to go ahead and wrap up, but I wanted to just again say thank you to everyone for joining us. And thank you so much again, Ebony, for coming and sharing such eloquent details of your leadership style and things that we can do to lead with kindness and authenticity. I'm just going to do a quick personal share before we jump off. When we were putting together the list for those people who we would like to come and share with the Lunch and Lead, Ebony really was one of the first people who came to mind for me. I shared the idea with Sheila, and she just lit up like a light bulb, like she would be perfect for this. And it's mainly just because in these conversations, these quick conversations over lunch, what we want to impress upon people is the different the different leadership styles and just offering a different view of what leadership looks like. So I think, because we talked a lot about women and ceilings and, you know, humbleness and how we were raised. And, you know, lots of us were raised in that era where women were often saw and not necessarily heard. And then when we did break into the business world, we had to be tough like the men, right? And so usually when you see a woman in power, sometimes she has the reputation of not being kind and not being so nice, but that's not the way that it has to be. And to me, Ebony is a true example of just a barrier breaker, and just someone who shows us that. So my grandfather had a saying, he says, you know, you catch more flies with honey. And so use your imagination. What else attracts flies? But he was so right. And you don't have to always be mean. And because you're nice doesn't mean that you're a pushover. And because you're kind and because you're empathetic and because you have compassion for people, it makes you actually a better leader. And so we definitely wanted to bring Ebony on just to share those best practices around compassionate leadership. And so with that, we are going to close. Someone asked really quickly in the comments if Ebony has a blog. She just shared her LinkedIn again. Once we
I saw that. I think that was Teresa.
Yeah.
I think she's pointing me in a
direction. And I told you that would
Go.
happen. So hopefully this has opened up a new door for you, a new career opportunity, maybe, or something to do on the side for you, Ebony, because I really think that more people would enjoy and benefit from your wisdom.
Thank you, Makisha.
so
And I would say to Michelle too, if Michelle, I know we're running out of time, you had a question, but I would love to connect with you offline and talk a little bit more about partnerships and collaborations.
Absolutely. And so what we're going to do when we share out the video, we will actually share Ebony's contact information again. You can reach her via LinkedIn, and that's about it. And we'll also share the Leadership Institute. So if you want to get some more training, feel free to reach out to us. We're here, we're available. We do corporate training. We do personalized trainings as well. Anything else? That's it. So thank you guys for coming.
Thank you guys.